All right, so this week is going to be about incident detection and analysis, primarily focusing on IDS, IPS. And so we talked about our SIME in the past. Again, that SIME, or the security information and event management, is all about crucial components of the modern infrastructure and being able to identify that stuff and send it all the way through the chain as it goes through. So that SIME is kind of the all-encompassing system. We're going to be focusing on just the part that does the analysis side of it. So from security monitoring perspective, we'll have continuous surveillance. This is going to help us do that potential security incident, any kind of policy violation, et cetera. All the data sources in terms of setting up network traffic logs, system logs, application logs. This is usually the hardest part, is to get everything to ship over. As a matter of fact, I was just working on this morning with a different system. And getting real-time detection or near real-time, and that will help us with our rapid response, which will keep our key performance indicators and our metrics down. Event correlation is used to techniques to analyze and link security events from various sources, enabling detection to intricate attack patterns or kind of coordinated campaigns across the entire system, and alert generation. So let's see here. I'm going to skip through some of this because that is all just a repeat of what we've talked about. So here is a practical example in malware detection. Our endpoint security logs and antivirus alerts are collected for analysis. We are then going to investigate those alerts, analyze their behavior, and conduct any kind of malware analysis to identify type, propagation, and potential impacts. A response may include isolating affected devices, deploying removal tools, and kind of updating antivirus to prevent the spread. And then our response is going over to prevention, and that prevention will be implementing endpoint protection, aka updating the filters, et cetera. Doing any kind of email filtering and employee cybersecurity training. Another one here, so a good example of this one that I just did actually here this morning and some for another company, is that one is really about going through the logs, and in my case, it was a Palo Alto logs, and finding that we were getting threats that were coming in on the spyware side of things. Really, all it was is somebody was trying to use a proxy in order to bounce traffic out so that it was hidden through Heidster. And so trying to figure out why that wasn't matching rules that we had set up in place. And at the end of the day, it depended on what kind of filter and profiles you're in. But it was the same kind of concept. We had to go through the traffic logs and correlate those to the end user logs, generate end user traffic, map those back across, and then bring that all into one system so we could see what was going on in real time. Abnormal or non-typical user detection. This is going to look through authentication logs, user access logs, network traffic data. Again, for collected analysis, analysts will probe unusual user behavior, comparing login times and historical data, and review the user access and role within the organization. If the behavior appears suspicious, the account may be temporarily suspended or an investigation is initiated. Implementing user behavior metrics or UBA solutions, any kind of RBAC solutions or your role-based access controls, and regular user access reviews. One that we had similar to this morning would have been where we noticed an extremely large amount of traffic that was taking forever. It was one of our backups. And in this case, we had a user go in and make some rather large changes. So the deltas that were being backed up every day is usually fairly small. In this case, it was over 750 gigs. So it was taking a little bit to traffic over the network. And that allowed us to kind of drill in and do this exact same thing. Here was a baseline. We had set those up. We noticed an abnormality on a backup user account that goes through the system, and we were able to detect the same thing that was going on there. Any kind of phishing attack detection or response, those email server logs, email gateway logs, and phishing detection tools are monitored for indicators of phishing activity. In this case, the analyst will analyze those reported emails, inspect the email headers, and assess the legitimacy of the sender information. The employees will be notified of a phishing campaign, and email filters are updated to block similar phishing emails. And we can also deploy any kind of email filtering solutions, conducting phishing simulations or trainings, and implementing multi-factor authentication. We tend to see this a lot here at Fort Hays as students as well as instructors. We get quite a bit of this going on. All right. So correlation rules are going to play a critical role in an incident detection and analysis within a security monitoring environment, particularly within the SIME. These rules are going to help identify complex security incidents by correlating multiple events or IOCs, indicators of compromise, across different data sources. So the correlation rules are designed as a purpose to find out what's going on. We have the conditions and the logic operators, such as the ands, ors, or nots. This is going to be really common in what you guys will be dealing with as analysts and working with these logic operators, both for correlation rules as well as log filtering, etc. And then setting up thresholds that would exceed those maximums and minimums. The different types of correlation, whether it's simply matching specific patterns or sequences of events without considering the context. We may want a complex one, which it's analyzing multiple events or their relationship to detect more of a sophisticated attack. A temporal correlation is focused on events that were within a specific time window or sequence. And then a statistical correlation is used to do a technique on identifying deviations from the baseline behavior. This is pretty much what we noticed this morning on ours. On the development and training, how to get people to identify those type of attacks, integrate that with our incident response, which was into the incident response process, triggering alerts that would prompt the security analyst to investigate this incident, and then being able to receive those alerts and gather additional context as we go through. And then more importantly is always going to be the continuous improvement, making sure that we identify new patterns of malicious activity, develop new correlation rules to detect the emerging threats, and make sure that the existing correlation rules are going through there. So a good example of this is that proxy that we were working on this morning is actually part of the Palo Alto labs. If you guys haven't taken that course, you will here in the spring. In order to complete those labs, we actually have you test going out to hackster.net, being able to do Hidester, do proxy over DNS, that kind of stuff. When we have those pods deployed for you students to work on further upstream, we obviously have protections in place so you wouldn't do that kind of thing. In this case, one of those vulnerability updates for a Palo Alto changed, and the way it was organizing that traffic, instead of looking at it as just purely web traffic and going to Hidester.com, it started mapping everything over port 53. So it was using DNS to hide the traffic going through there, and therefore it no longer matched that rule that we had in place to say allow. It would end up blocking it by the generic block anything that's not what we say it is. And it's no different than what you guys are doing here. It's literally the same steps that we went through, trying to correlate what changed. In that case, we noticed the app ID changed within the Palo Alto, and then trying to map that back to when that happened in a time sequence, and then going back on the statistics and noting that there was a large pattern of denies being submitted here recently by the firewall, and that was purely because of the timing of it. So doing a detection of a distributed denial of service attack, there'll be a spike in network traffic. Usually this anomaly detection will trigger a rule, and the volume of inbound traffic exceeds a predefined threshold within a specific time window. We'll use the logic of OR and a 5 times increase on the inbound traffic compared to the historical baseline within a 15-minute window, and we'll generate an alert for further investigation if we see that. We could also set up one for simultaneous increase in server errors if there's monitoring service logs. For a high volume of error responses, such as HTTP 500 or database connection errors, this would be an AND logic. And a 3 times increase in server error correspondence coinciding with the spike in network traffic. So this and this at the same time will generate a high priority alert and escalate for immediate investigation. So the real goal here is, if you'll notice on both of these, they require us having some type of baseline. How many errors would we normally see within a X amount of period? And in this case, it would be a 15-minute window. So how many errors would we see within a 15-minute window? Do we see a 3 times increase in those server responses going through there? And then if that matches with a 5 times increase in inbound traffic, we know we possibly have a denial of service attack going on. These will keep stemming out. So in this case, we're also going to look for geographical source diversity. This is where we're going to take that same logic and it with correlating spike in traffic from different geographic locations, incoming traffic from at least 10 different countries within a 5-minute window. We'll again generate an alert and prioritize investigation due to the potential indication of a coordinated denial of service attack. This may be normal if your company is, servicing the world and you guys have users from all over the world coming in. This may need to be adjusted in order for that to come in. We actually had a rule very similar to this at one point when we were doing the lab system. And because we did service the world, we would have a bunch of countries coming in within a 5-minute window. So it required us using these and operators to say this one triggered, then this one triggered, this one triggered, this one triggered. We more than likely have a denial of service type attack. On our protocol and port analysis, monitoring any kind of network traffic for unusual protocols or port usages, specifically for TCP UDP ports commonly associated with the distributed denial of service attack, something like UDP port 53 for DNS amplification. Correlate that with the spike in network traffic that comes back over here. Any kind of presence of traffic on non-standard ports coinciding with the spike up above. And then we'll again generate an alert to go through there. On the rate limiting and traffic filtering, deploy some kind of rate limiting measures or traffic filtering rules on the firewall or device. Trigger those measures automatically upon detection of a denial of service attack. And we can have an automated response in this case that will apply that rate limiting immediately for us. In our response, we'll want to verify the occurrence of a denial of service attack. Through further analysis and investigation, we'll implement any kind of mitigation, such as the rate filtering, etc. Notify any relevant stakeholders, including network operations team, senior management, etc., about the ongoing incident, and then continuously monitor the network for any changes in the attack patterns and adjust response measures accordingly. That's the big deal, is even though you think you're blocking it, you can see one coming on, there's a good chance they're going to start tweaking their pattern in order to find the holes in the firewall that will allow it to keep going. At the same time, you are rate limiting different traffic. So you don't want to rate limit your own traffic still going out. Otherwise, you will have a denial of service on your side just by purely having a congested internet link. In a Palo Alto, how many of you have actually taken the Palo Alto course? Nobody yet? Everybody taking it in the spring?
I think I'm taking it in the spring.
Okay. So in that
Maybe.
case, we would show you that we would actually drop those packets. We wouldn't actually send a response like a denial, because our response for a denial would end up causing us to overload our firewall, right? If we had to deny every piece of traffic coming in on those things when it gets hit, it would spike our management CPU through the roof. So we would end up just dropping those packets as they come through and never sending a response. All right. In a dashboard. So this dashboard, and believe me, they are handy. They're tough to build out. There's a lot of moving parts, but man, are they much nicer to use when you're actually trying to troubleshoot. So they're going to provide a visual representation of key security metrics, alerts, and trends, enabling you as security analysts or SOC analyst teams to quickly access the security posture of a organization and respond to the incidents effectively. So the purpose of those is to give us just a visual what's going on. It will hopefully give us those IOCs or indicators of compromise. I'm going to keep highlighting that phrase because that's going to be one of the big ones on the exams and such, as they want to talk about their IOCs. From various sources, allowing analysts to detect suspicious activity, anomalies, etc. You're going to be able to monitor and report those based off those security metrics, any kind of performance indicators, and compliance. The components that you guys will see will have any kind of alerts. You'll be seeing your overall KPIs, your metrics, etc. Any kind of event trends and patterns if we're starting to see a lot of incidents all at once. It's also nice to see the geospatial visualization where you're seeing attacks come or information come from across the world. If you're noticing a large amount of traffic suddenly start showing up from the United Kingdom or China or Russia, you might know something's going on. And that can help us provide some quick insights as to what's going on. There's different types of dashboards. Typically, you'll have that executive dashboard, which is really tailored for the senior management. They're the ones that are focused on your KPIs, your metrics, etc. Are we in compliance? That kind of thing. The operational ones are going to be used by the SOC team and the security analyst for day-to-day monitoring. You're going to have our compliance dashboards. This will help you track and demonstrate compliance with regulatory requirements, industry standards, and internal policies. This could be like your 5 nines. Have you broke down through your regulations and standards that you set forth? And then you'll have your threat intelligence dashboards. These will integrate external threat intelligence feeds. So it'll be linked to a bunch of other different sources to try to provide you with insights into the current threat landscape, emerging threats, indicators of compromise. Yes, this could even be like tied into Reddit where you're pulling in, what are the latest things people are talking about. You'll also have your CVE feeds, things like that will all show up in this dashboard. Benefits of that is you guys can see a better situational awareness, incident response, make a data-driven decision-making, and then improve your communication across everybody in the site itself. Report-wise, these are one thing that employers really kind of ask for us to focus on more than anything. So being able to communicate what you're finding with upper level management. Based on the employers that have hired our students in the past, this is one thing that they really wanted us to try to get students to understand was how to generate or communicate that there's an error to somebody that doesn't understand what that means. You have a denial of service attack. Great. What does that really mean to the team as a whole in non-technical terms? So finding insights and recommendations for the various stakeholders, including senior management, IT teams, security analysts, and regulatory authorities. There's going to be a couple different kinds that you'll pull in. The key components is always going to be this executive summary, which is a concise summary of the report's findings, including the scope of the incidents analyzed, key metrics, trends, and high-level recommendations. Then providing an overview of the incident itself, which is specific security incidents that were analyzed within the report, including the incident type, severity, assets, timeline of events. This timeline is a big thing in order to build out a timeline of what happened. Analysis and deep findings. This is going to be your in-depth goo. This is what we're probably the best at. And then our key metrics and performance indicators of what would have happened related to that incident. Recommendations for future action items, including improving the security posture and enhancing the incident detection rate. Lessons learned, reflections here. This could be something that, we could have positives and we could have negatives, but the idea is this is what we're going to do for remediating things in the future. And then any kind of additional supporting information, including incident logs, forensic analysis reports, etc., that you might need for regulatory compliance. So these are your main types of reports. As you go through here, you have your incident response reports, your security incident, your trend analysis, and your compliance reports. The benefits of those is really going to focus on the transparency and accountability, continuous improvement, and mostly when you get to regulatory. The real big thing, though, is being able to communicate that with your stakeholders involved. So if you're working for a Fortune 500, you guys have an attack, you need to be able to do this so that you don't rock your stock. That works the same way, whether or not you're in a small business, just the same. You want to make sure that you have documentation, that you alert anybody if an incident truly happened, that credit card information was taken, etc. These days, if you're not transparent on that, the fines alone will eat you alive. All right. On the alerting side of things, it's going to play a critical role for us to be able to see that. So early detection of those, basically setting up alerts. You're going to get tons and tons of false alarms as you go through here, and being able to train the system to be better over time, but being able to quickly identify what's a false alert and what's not. So key components of that alerting is going to be our sources, our triggers, what prioritization is going to be set there, and then correlating that with other events until we can get it all the way down to where we can determine what's going on. Those security alerts are going to be generated in response to any kind of events or anomalies that come in. These threat intelligence alerts are going to be coming from outside sources typically. Your compliance alerts are going to be any kind of violations or deviations from your requirements. This is pretty important if you guys are working on any kind of critical infrastructure, things like that, where you have to generate responses to those type of alerts. You're going to have this typical workflow. So you're going to have a triage, usually as you're going to start down here. You're going to come into investigation, response, detection, and then an alert generation. So that might even start over here on the right. The benefits of those alerts is getting to a timely response and enhanced situational awareness. Basically having an efficient triage. In other words, figuring out, is this a false alarm, true alarm? And then once we do have it as a true alarm, what's the potential impact? Are we going to be hit hard or not? So triaging alerts as it comes through. This process is going to help you efficiently manage and respond to those incidents, ensuring that the critical threats are assessed promptly and minimizing the impact of those false positives with less significant alerts. So basically it boils down to prioritization, being able to determine the relevance to your business impact. In other words, if you got an IOC that shows up on your dashboard that has really no relevance to your company, but it is a IOC, you may want to notate it in your mind, but you need to determine that that isn't really relevant to our type of network. A lot of this is going to apply down to the human judgment, right? So you're going to get all sorts of alerts. It's that interpretation phase that you guys are going to be the biggest impact for. Of course, AI is helping with that, but it's not perfect in that response. All right, so those are all the same there, dealing with false alerts. So like I said, the biggest thing you guys are going to be doing is dealing with those false positives as they come through. Those occur when the security monitoring tools generate alerts or activities that are not actual security threats, but they tend to map to those. And so managing those false positives are going to effectively and essential to prevent alert fatigue. Basically, you guys are burned out by seeing the red flashing light every single time. Optimizing resource utilization, that you guys aren't off chasing individual threats, and then to maintain the credibility and efficiency of the security itself. So mitigation strategies that are used by organizations are going to be things like tuning and refinement, basically adjusting those rules and thresholds and any kind of correlation logic used by the security tool to help reduce those false positives over time. Really getting into normalization and enriching those security data events to help improve the accuracy. Suppression or even deduplication of multiple alerts being generated at the same time for the same thing. And then really setting up a feedback loop in order between you security analysts and the incident response systems to provide ongoing feedback of the detection mechanisms. That gets you back into your reporting, setting that up, how you can clean those up in the future, setting up training and awareness basically for your SOC teams themselves to mitigate false positives effectively and efficiently, and then continuous improvement for that as well. However, when we do have an incident, we're going to have incident escalation, and we're going to refer to those processes of evaluating the severity or the complexity of a security event to a higher authority or an expert within the organization's incident response framework. And a lot of times this could be you're the same person that's going to escalate this. The goal here is to get to a timely response, right? So from the time you were alerted to the time you actually realized, hey, this is a real thing, let's escalate it. And the moment it gets escalated so they can determine how bad or how big of an impact we have, that's all going to affect your KPIs and your metrics for the organization. So it allows the organizations to allocate additional resources, specialized skills, tools, technologies. In other words, you may be hiring outside people in order to take care of this portion of it. If you guys are just reading your alerts on your side, you may hire a third party to do some of the specialized forensic investigations in there. So defining when things should be escalated and the path at which they should be escalated, being able to determine what kind of containment strategies, what kind of resources you're going to be allocating to that, and communication protocols during that time. Again, with the same feedback mechanisms, making sure that you're updating people, particularly the stakeholders or incident response teams and any kind of relevant parties. A lot of times this could involve, law enforcement, et cetera, depending on what's going on. So you identify it, you make your decisions as to what's going on with your assessments, your notifications, and kind of moving all the way up to your resolution. An effective response is going to be one that receives the attention that it needs and the expertise required to facilitate that. We try to mitigate our risk as we're going forward, basically containment on this side, and then getting out to your compliance as usual. For communication paths, these guys are going a little deep and stuff. Going to your identification, investigation, resolution, and closure, whether this is email, instant messaging, phone calls, emails, and briefings. Really working with your vendors. This is probably the one I see the most, is working with your vendors to determine if they're seeing anything. A good example of that here a while back was Palo Alto had released an update, and one of the attacks was attacking all Palo Alto firewalls. They were saying there was no issue, and then they finally came back and said, hey, we have a bad issue. Their communication emails that came out said, basically, if you don't fix this in the next 24 hours, you're on your own. It was a very poorly worded email that went out to everybody from that vendor. It caused a mass amount of panic and scare because everybody was trying to figure out how to fix it and how to mitigate it. They actually didn't have the steps to do that. And in some cases, they had to do it all via the CLI and reboot a bunch of things. It was pretty nasty. Eventually, they got to a much better technique. So had they spent a little bit better time on the communication piece, they would have saved their call center a lot of headache and a lot of customer issues on their side. That happened here last spring. Actually, when we were at the B-Sides conference, if those of you attended the spring B-Sides conference, Palo Alto was having a pretty rough time during that. Would have been 420 of last spring. Information sharing organizations. This is really what a lot of places have started to set up, and I've seen them even pop up in small towns here like Hayes, where you have a lot of security people in the industry working together to try to share their threat intelligence, their indicators of compromise, and their best practices for these different things. Particularly just sharing information. Hey, we're seeing a lot of influx of traffic from Russia, China. Here's how they're coming in. Here's the ports that they're coming from. Sharing that information among the community is going to be your best chance of identifying those early on. And now the federal government is really starting to work with a bunch of people as well. So, for example, the ISPs here in town are starting to work more and more with the federal government so that they can try to identify these kind of things ahead of time. I think that goes in both directions. It's good and bad. It's more oversight on their side where they can kind of share some information. A lot of times, though, you'll see it's just a one-way street. In other words, they'll give you the information you want to give them, but they demand all the information from you. Regulatory authorities, this is going to be during a data breach, making sure that organizations are notifying the authorities for legal and compliance requirements. This is a big deal. Like I said, now, if you are losing any kind of personal data and you don't report that, you can be fined very, very heavily now. And then law enforcement agencies may be engaged in the event of a cyber attack, data breach, or any kind of criminal activities involving cybersecurity incidents. This is particularly important in some cases with your cyber insurance policy, that you may want to activate a law enforcement or not activate law enforcement for that. And then on your documentation and reporting, these are the incident responses, your status updates, and your post-incident analysis. So Most of your SIMs are going to have a built-in ticketing system, and that's really what you guys are going to do to collect your information. Because those SIMs are already having the centralized logging and prioritization, et cetera, it helps build out your ticketing all the way through. Now, these are good tools of the different ones that are out there. ServiceNow is used quite often. I'm pretty familiar with Zendesk is one that we've used in the past in some of the companies I've been with. This Jira, I'm hearing more and more about this one for a service desk. These other ones I haven't quite heard of, the Remedy and Fresh Service. Anybody else heard of any of these out here? Peyton, when you were on your internship, what did you guys have for a ticketing system?
Oh, it was muted. Ticketing system. It was, I think it was ServiceNow was the one that we used, I believe.
Gotcha. Yep. Yeah, that one I've heard of, and I know a lot of big companies start to use that one. I use Zendesk in some of the stuff that and the companies I've worked with just because it works and it's a little bit cheaper for smaller companies. These other ones I haven't been a part of yet. So again, you're going to be using this sign to kind of define your scenarios and detect any kind of security threats in your logging, et cetera, through log to collection detection. We talked about that last time, but it's really going to be those correlation rules that you guys are going to use to analyze and link events together. So you're going to be using that and logic or logic. There again, when we get back up to this one alert here that we were talking about, is being able to say or. So if this is a spike in traffic and it has over 5x and it has all these simultaneous server errors and it has a geographical source diversity and the protocol and everything's going wonky off stuff that we're not used to, and we're going to go ahead and implement an automated limiting factor to start, we may go ahead and shut it down entirely, but this will at least rate limit it at that point. So being able to set these generation rules up in the SIM is going to be the time that takes the most and the thing that you're going to tweak all the time. It's never going to be static as you move through there, especially as your company changes, right? So if you're a small company to begin with, you guys may only be pushing 100 mega traffic, on a daily average kind of thing. 6 years later, you might be pushing more than a gig of traffic because now you guys are pushing bigger files, et cetera, which means you have to update all of your network baselines. So a lot of times that could be done on a monthly basis, weekly basis, even yearly basis. You're rerunning those baselines. All right. Anybody have any questions on incident detection and analysis? When we get to those CYSA labs, you guys will get way more hands-on with actually developing those rules, et cetera.
It's kind of going backwards and it's for a different, probably for a different class, but was there any like rules or regulations or punishment for um that Palo Alto incident of them saying everything's fine and then you have 24 hours? Like, was there anything from
Um,
that besides a
not
stock price?
mostly stock price. I mean, the thing is when it first got identified, from what I understand, there really wasn't good indicators of compromise as it was going
Okay.
through. And then all of a sudden they were able to find how they were coming in. Once they figured that out, then it was a Mayday type of event. You needed to patch it immediately. So
Okay.
anybody else have any questions? Yeah, I'd have to go back. See if
Is there a specific class, sorry, that we're supposed to take for the Palo Alto you're talking about?
yeah, so it'll be the network security firewalls. It's a 686 course in the spring.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got that one then.
Let's see here. the CV here. Yep. It was this one. It was a Global Protect was having the biggest issue. So if you were running Global Protect, essentially they were able to come in and gain access to your system pretty quickly. So, and Global Protect is their remote VPN. So some of you guys use like OpenVPN or maybe WireGuard, etc. The one baked into Palo Alto is called Global Protect. Yep. And so, yeah, if you haven't taken that course, you guys will, as part of the undergrad cybersecurity side. And this coming spring, you guys will do not only the Palo Alto, but you're also going to get into the pfSense and OpenSense and be able to actively compare those. The Palo Alto is great. It's good to understand how the next generation firewalls work. But a lot of times they're just so expensive that you can't deploy those in a small, medium business. And so by training on that one, you can take what they're doing and then apply that down to something that's a little bit cheaper on that side. And then you can also determine, okay, it's worth the extra $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a year so that we don't have to deal with this and it's all automated on the Palo side. That's really what it boils down to, is how much money can you budget for making sure that's easier for you on your side. Because at the end of the day, if you save $10,000 by having a lower budget system, like say an OpenSense and a bunch of open source logging software, etc. But if you would have had the Palo Alto, you could have had your mean time to detection way, way shorter. And if somebody actually ended up getting on your network and it took you 6 months to determine that there was actually an issue, how much money did you really lose? You know what I mean? That 10,000 could have been a drop in the bucket at the end of the day. So.
Sounds good.
Usually takes an incident for upper management to say, yeah, we'll spend money on that.
I've found that that's a common theme.
Yep.
Is that they sign a lot of budget papers when something bad happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, again, that should get you through this week. Thursday, we won't really have anything. Did we have a lab last week? Oh yeah. I will get all those answers published out here. I have that on my list of today.
All right. And I'm sure you probably already know, but for the answers, I was getting a weird error whenever I tried to put the okay, cool.
Bunch of people are emailing there again. Forget about the answers. Focus on the content of the labs. I know the answers are horrible. Just focus on the lab.
Okay. I was just wanting to let you know.
Yep. No, I got a bunch of alerts that people were hating these labs, and I get that. The only reason you're hating it is because of the questions that are coming up. If we didn't have the questions, you guys would just be focused on the content and you'd be good. So
awesome.
Sounds good.
All right.
So
We will
no class on Thursday. Sorry.
Nope. That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't really see one for Thursday because this was a shorter content section. Unless you guys have a reason to meet on Thursday. It's up to you guys.
No, I don't think I had anything.
When we get into the CYSA labs, we'll definitely want to do Tuesday, Thursday, at least if we just do one lab each period.
Yeah.
That will help, because otherwise you guys will have 4 labs to complete. Yep, I would say no class on Thursday this week.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
See you.